Thank you so much for joining us, Vaishali.
It's a pleasure.
How would you define your shift from financial sector to the development sector? What was your motivation behind it?
Sure. Yeah, it was, first of all, thank you for having me on this session. It's a pleasure to be talking to you and all the other people who have joined this session. I think my journey has been pretty organic, Deepak. I started my master's in New York, and I actually wanted to join the development sector at that point in time. I had interned at the World Bank, etc., and I was quite keen to work there. But the circumstances were such that I had to also consider options in New York, and so I also made a plan B, which was apply for jobs on Wall Street, because as a immigrant in New York City, I needed a job, and so I kind of positioned myself for both. And after my graduate program, I had a job in the development sector, which is at the World Bank, and at JP Morgan, which was an investment bank on Wall Street. So, I wanted to just put it on the table that my heart has always been in the development space. And so I started working at JP Morgan, and it was a fantastic ride. I really enjoyed what I did. And for many years, about 10 to 12 years, I was focused on investment banking, corporate finance in large multinationals, etc. It was a very rewarding journey, helped me learn a lot, helped me develop certain skills which were invaluable. And so I really value that time. When ReNew Powers was started by Sumant, my husband, who's the founder of the company, I was a part of the founding team. Because in any, as you know, in any entrepreneurial venture, there is much to be done, and there are very few people there because, you have limited resources, etc. So I chipped in for all activities which are required to get a startup up and running. And eventually, when we had a team, I asked myself, what am I doing in an infra company? It's not, what I've been passionate about. I really didn't see that I had the skills other than just contributing to the organization. I didn't really want to be working very closely with my husband in terms of in the same space. I wanted to do something which had its own sort of identity. And as things evolved and as the company grew, there was, I think, a common vision Sumant and I shared. And that common vision was that it's not only about building a company or an organization, it's also, which is good, but it's also about doing good alongside that. And I really took to that idea, and, hence began a lot of the social responsibility work we were doing. And at that time, it wasn't mandatory, in 2011 or 12 even. But, from our first site, we've always been focused on engaging with our communities and, adding value in whichever way we can. So that was my shift to what I can call the development sector, not really, but to social responsibility.
So could you tell us about the themes or the thematic areas that you're working as a part of the foundation itself?
Yeah, sure. So, so let me talk a little bit about our CSR work at ReNew. So as in the beginning, we started our CSR work in and around a community. So that's how we started. And from the beginning, our motto was to do work which was, deep, impactful, and to take the 360-degree approach. We didn't have to do too many things, but whatever we did, we wanted to do it very thoroughly with the impact which was visible in the community. But then as we kept growing, and ReNew grew very rapidly, the amount of work we had to do started becoming quite large. So we had to scale up our CSR work as well. So eventually we had to bucketize a lot of our work around basically a few key pillars. One was basically, if you look at the broad pillars of development, they're human, social, natural, capital. And so our flagship programs are centered around that. And so one of the programs we do is Lighting Lives. And Lighting Lives is a program where, we work with schools in remote parts of India. where they don't have electricity. Even if they have connection, half of India, half of the schools in rural India do not get electricity, and so children go to schools in very high temperatures in the summer with not even a fan. So we wanted to ensure that we can work on the next generation where they've had an enjoyable or just a basic sort of environment in which they go to school, etc. So Lighting Lives is about putting rooftops in schools which have no electricity, and then using it as a tool to educate them around renewable energy. What is renewable energy? What is the science behind it? Why do we need to use it? And what does it do to their future, to the future of the planet, etc. So that's one of our programs. The other program which we work on is something which I'm very passionate and excited about. It's a brand new program, and we've been doing it for about a year and a half, so not that brand new, but reasonably new. It's called the ReNew Women India Initiative. It's a socio-economic empowerment program for rural women to basically, become entrepreneurs, but within their own ecosystem. Become entrepreneurs in such a way that they understand what they're doing, and it sort of emanates from their environment. So if it is a region where you have turmeric, we want to be able to get women to utilize their time to be able to not only sort of prepare the turmeric, but also be able to sell it and earn a livelihood, right? And if, let's assume there are women who are at home and are interested in stitching, and there's schools there, school-going children, they can set up a venture where they can make uniforms and provide it to the students there and earn a livelihood. So the importance of self-reliance and having financial independence is what we want to ingrain in some of these women in rural India. We do a lot of work around water. Of course, water is a very, very critical issue, which the world is going to is thinking about, and it's a challenge. In Gurgaon, it's a big challenge, and there are a lot of parts in India where, like Rajasthan, where there's no safe drinking water. Even if there is water, it's not clean, etc. So we look at all of these issues, and we work on desilting, on setting up hand pumps, and various other activities, basically to provide access to water for women, because it's the women who travel miles to get water. It's basically adding hours to their lives. We also give scholarships to young girls and children for STEM-related higher education, which would be college, as a part of the RESET program. So I would say broadly, these are the few buckets. We do a lot more, but these are the main buckets of our CSR programs. I would say that we've, if you were to look at the impact we've had, we've probably impacted 2.5 lakh lives across 171 villages in about 9 states across India. So that is the impact of our work, and a broad description of some of the programs ReNew Power does.
Well, that's wonderful. And talking about, these were some of the institutional initiatives that you are engaged with. But apart from these, you also engage your employees into volunteering efforts for social good. How do you motivate them, and what are some of these activities that you do around to kind of bring in the whole feeling of doing good for the society into the people who work for you?
There are a lot of millennials who work for us, a lot of youngsters, and that's wonderful. But they're not necessarily happy with just their roles. I think they want more. They want more fulfillment, and so we have found that CSR related work is quite popular amongst this set of students and young employers who work at ReNew. So from the beginning, we have engaged employees in very, very innovative programs. So one of our programs is a program called the Rice Bucket Challenge. So what is the Rice Bucket Challenge? It's a little bit of a take off from the Ice Bucket Challenge. I don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's a way to kind of create awareness around ALS, and it had become quite viral maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe around 14, 15, around that time. And what we wanted to do was we wanted to engage our employees in also giving. So we thought that let's ask what's the easiest thing to do, because when you ask people to write big checks, etc., it's kind of intimidating. Some of them are not ready for it. It doesn't really go down very well. So we said, let's do something fun. What's the easiest thing you can do? You can just get maybe a box of rice to work. You just go in your kitchen and just get some and just donate it. Whether it's a kilo, it's half a kilo, just tell us what it is and just give it to us. And so we started collecting rice from renewers, and then we would go and distribute it through our NGO network. We also have a volunteering program where a lot of our renewers go to schools and educational institutions. It could be even MBA institutions or high schools to talk about renewable energy.
Now, talking about the other people who are in the sector, so a major chunk is the NGOs and social enterprises. And the biggest difficulty that they face is in terms of raising funds or, attracting donors for their cause. As good as it might be, but funds are a scarcity that a lot of NGOs face. Like you mentioned, your platform iCharity was established to kind of resolve the same. What was the idea, and do you think there are more linkages that can be created around the similar model, and how should we go about the same if it's an NGO who would want to raise more funds?
Yeah, it's extremely important for NGOs to get funds. However, I feel that the environment we are in which right now, where India is one of the most unique countries in the world where we have CSR regulation. And so a lot of funds have become available to NGOs. There has never been a time where there was more, money available for NGOs to use. And I think the gap is not about being able to get the funds, but the gap is around how effectively can you put these funds to good use. And so in that area, I believe, and I had made a recommendation also to the government that, we require a lot more capacity building in the sector and, to enable the NGOs to be able to use these funds effectively, efficiently, as we do in business. And, so I think that is where the real need is. I don't think that in India there is a scarcity of funds for NGOs.
Now, gender equality is another cause that you feel strongly about. Do you think the efforts towards the same have been overlapping rather than complementary, considering that we're seeing multiple narratives that are coming out and there are multiple initiatives around the same?
Yeah, no, Deepak, I agree with you totally. It's sort of it's bothersome to see sometimes that there's so much talk on gender, but when you look around you, you see that not much has changed. And I'm not talking about cities like Mumbai or Gurgaon or Delhi, etc. These are all outliers. But if you look at our country at large, I think there's so much more talk, especially when you look at the rural area. There's much talk, and I think there's a lot of leverage around this issue. But I'm not sure if the eventual final stakeholders really get the benefit of all of this. So that's something which we really need to address. But I'd like to, before I get into the depth of that, I wanted to say that we are at a better spot now. We've never been at a better spot than we are now, because I think women have the ability to go and get educated. They have the ability to go and get jobs. Employers are quite sensitized, and there are a lot of campaigns to support participation of women in the workplace. Now the question is that, is the gender sort of movement and women empowerment just a wallpaper, right, on the wall, which is distracting from the weak cement which lies beyond this wallpaper? You knock it and it's going to fall. And I think it's a bit of that, because what's happening is women are coming in the workforce, but as they spend more time in the workforce, first of all, they don't have enough support to sustain their careers, because it requires a global, it requires an ecosystem to sustain a career. You really need to be very committed to do well at work, and so you do require support from your spouse. Very importantly, you need to be very committed yourself, because if you are committed, then you can even orient others to help you in this task. I think women need to do a lot more to be able to fight to have good careers. And I think it's extremely rewarding. You see successful women. It's important. Not everybody may want a career, and that's all right. But we really need to make sure that there are better policies, firmer policies, fairer policies to ensure that it's worth it for women to stay at the workplace. So I think a lot of work has to be done by different stakeholders, be it the government, be it the corporates, be it the families as well, to commit to ensuring that women have a more secure place in the professional environment.
So for the next question, I'd like for you to give a one-line advice to a particular set of people. So what would be that one line of advice for CSR heads?
So CSR heads, I would say, first of all, find a spot in the boardroom or in the management sort of, and don't be, somebody who's working as a sub part of an HR function or some other function. That's often the case in India Inc. So I would say, first of all, find a spot where you can make a difference. Otherwise, there's no point doing CSR in an organization.
And what would be that advice for NGOs and social enterprises?
Again, I would say focus on capacity building. It's critical for them to survive and to get more funds. So engage, a lot of consultants like McKinsey, etc., run programs, pro bono programs. So just go out there and get some training so that you can become more effective to do more good. And
lastly, are there any concluding remarks that you would like to give to the listeners or the viewers of this particular video?
What you do and how you do what you do is very important. So just make sure that when you spend CSR funds, it's not for the sake of spending these funds. It's not a check against a plan we have to deliver. Just if each of us try to focus on the impact more than the plan, I think we'll definitely be creating a better world and transforming, lives, in a far better way than we are currently doing. So, that's the way I approach CSR, and I think my team really feels like I do a lot of that. But I feel that there's no point doing CSR in particular. If you're not going beyond Excel spreadsheets and PPTs, it may work for finance, but it doesn't work for CSR. So for all the listeners, that would be my advice.
Perfect. So that brings us to the end of the conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, Vaishali. It's been a pleasure.
Same here. Thanks, Deepak.